Another interesting thing is associated with explosions and also earthquakes is S and P waves. And there were none detectable with the towers. It's those waves go through the Earth. There were only surface waves. I thought that was interesting. The fuzzballs at the deep level, which are indicative of continuing breakdown of the dust. It started out as coarse particles, then became finer and finer and finer. Oh, and the truckloads of dirt that were brought in right afterwards. We got photos of a lineup of dirt trucks, and then they dump it and haul it back out. And I was there in 2007, and they're still hauling dirt in and out.
Why?
You'll have to ask them. But it was pretty interesting. They're still fuming. The ground is continuing to fume. Bankers Trust they needed to take down because it's got the ongoing process. And they still haven't finished taking it down. They're only halfway down. It's been contaminated by whatever this energy system is. It's what, almost 9 years later? If they're going to take a building apart, then building on the other side, Fiderman Hall, they just finished taking down this past December. And it had some contamination too, or infection of this, ongoing energy reaction. There's a Swiss cheese appearance to beams. They're kind of half eaten out, if they're still there. There's some that are eaten out. That's evidence of molecular dissociation, the instantaneous rusting of things. What steel is mainly iron, but it has carbon and some other doodads added in that enhance its structural properties and also enhance its resistance to rust. If you take away those ingredients, you have pure iron. And I think everyone's experienced leaving an iron skillet in the sink with water in it.
Right.
It turns bright orange with rust.
Right. I do remember that.
We had steel pipes with bright orange rust on them instantly, as though they had become pure iron on the surface at the World Trade Center. Pretty interesting. Rustification is what I'm calling it. Then let's see. Weird fires. I just call them weird fires. They look like fire, but without high heat. Here's an example. Aluminum glows like any other metal at 1,000 centigrade and higher. But the trouble is, at 600 degrees, aluminum melts. So that means if aluminum's going to glow, it'll be in its melted state. We have an image of pieces of outer aluminum cladding, still rigid, that are glowing. Now explain that. If they're hot enough to glow, things glow, above 1,000 or 1,200 degrees centigrade. Aluminum should be a puddle, but it's still rigid, but it's glowing. I think that's a pretty good indication that it's not hot. It's glowing for another reason.
Can you explain it?
There's something that's sort of related to it. Have you ever heard of St. Elmo's fire?
I mean, I've heard of it. I don't understand it.
It's sort of an electrical thing. Plasmas are an ionized gas where there's extra electrons floating around or not enough, where electrons are moving, to atoms or away from atoms, and that's where light comes from, depending on what environment they're in. And I kind of think that's related to these weird apparent fires that do, probably turn into fires, but they start out this other thing that is not a normal fire. There were firefighters who said, we're trying to put out the car fires, but the water had no effect on these fires. That's an interesting comment. So they're going to, get foam and see if that was going to help. So, and also, weird fires is another thing associated with the Hutchison effect. I think they're all sort of the same thing, as well as cold fusion. You can get it kind of glowing. Also, transmutation is another issue, where elements actually change. Like John Hutchison has a sample of brass, which is high in copper,
Right.
has some zinc in it, and then the area that is affected has equal copper and zinc, where before it had, many times more copper. So, you can say, okay, it's got hot and some of the copper left. Well, the zinc's going to go away sooner. The zinc has a lower boiling temperature and melting temperature than copper. So why are they now equal where the unaffected one, copper, was much higher? Well, if you, take one proton of one and hand it to the other one, you turn copper into zinc. And it appears that's what's happening, and that is transmutation, which is thought to only occur, at a temperature as hot as the sun. The same with fusion. But you get that same thing of transmutation at room temperature or near room temperature with cold fusion. And I think it's all the same kind of process, where temperature as hot as the sun is equivalent to somebody breaking into a house with a crowbar and a bulldozer versus using a key to open the front door.
Interesting.
So if you have the right key to get the door open, you can access that free energy.
How many hits do you get? Do you track your site's hits?
I get, I don't know, 600 or so. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down.
A day?
Yeah.
Have you ever had your site attacked?
Not yet. Not a whole lot. I used to have a free tripod site. That was Jane Doe. And they started making it so that anybody with Internet Explorer with Microsoft Windows couldn't see my website. So somebody donated web space for me for my new site, and that's how I have it.
That's great. Is this on blog software? Are you on WordPress, or just this is a regular site?
Just a regular site. Andrew Johnson, who has checktheevidence.com in the UK, set the site up for him. It was wonderful of him to do that. He also set one up for John Hutchison because his site was attacked and was taken over by, I call them trolls. Lead follower gets out of the way. If they're in the way, they're called trolls. And who hijacked his site and were putting fake videos on there, saying that was John's fake videos.
Got it. Well, you're very brave to do what you're doing. What is it going to take for people to become more receptive to your body of work, at least in understanding on the forensic level the truth about what happened, that what we've been told and maybe what we've been telling each other and the way the buildings came down is not something that we've understood before?
I highly recommend reading my book. I know that sounds a little bit self-serving, but it's not. I've carefully put things together in a particular order and shown all the different classes of evidence in such a way that if one thing doesn't meet your fancy, another thing does. Of course, we have the toasted cars, and we have holes, and then holes in the ground, and jumpers. There's various aspects, and every single one of the chapters by itself, is evident of what happened.
And where do we buy this book? Do we go to Amazon or?
Yeah, you can place orders right now on Amazon. On my website, when it's available, I'll put a link up there.
And what is the name of it?
Where Did the Towers Go?
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming to It's Rainmaking Time to talk about something I've considered an anomaly for a long time and really felt like there wasn't the proper place to talk about it. In a broadcast setting, there wasn't the proper context laid out. There wasn't a call for a real deep, honest forensic look at this. I imagine that there is opposition to what you're saying, isn't there?
Yeah, they call themselves the Truth Movement, and
Yes.
I'm like contraband.
Because?
They have an agenda, I think, and I don't fit their agenda, so I'm called COINTELPRO, and whatever the name calling, it doesn't address the evidence, and I only want to address the evidence. And there's a pretty interesting, and if you start looking at it, it gets really intriguing. Oh my gosh! I got a picture of this bus that was